In this video, we are going to talk about the first rib. The first rib is an atypical rib. Now, we know that the third to ninth ribs are the typical ribs. Why they are called typical? Because they have same or typical anatomical features, and it is very difficult or almost impossible to differentiate between them or to identify them separately from their anatomical features. But the first, second, 10th, 11th and 12th ribs, they have some atypical or peculiar features by means of which they can be separately and individually identified. So these are known as atypical ribs. So the first rib is an atypical rib. Now, it is the strongest, flattest and most curved of all the ribs. It is also the shortest of the true ribs. Now, you know that the first 7 ribs are the true ribs, which are the vertebrosternal ribs, and the vertebrochondral and the vertebral ribs are the false ribs. That is, the 8th, 9th, 10th are the vertebrochondral ribs, and the 11th and the 12th, these are the vertebral ribs or the floating ribs. So, these 5 pairs of ribs that we have, these are known as the false ribs. So it is the shortest of the true ribs. The first rib, it just like a typical rib, it has a sternal end and it has a vertebral end and with an intervening shaft. The vertebral end, it consists of a head, a tubercle and an intervening neck. The sternal end is about 3 centimeters below the vertebral end. So the first rib slopes downwards. Okay, because it slopes downwards and forwards because the sternal end is about 3 to 4 centimeters below the vertebral end. Okay. Now, because of this, the summit of the lung, it extends, the summit of the apex of the lung, it extends beyond the sternal end, but the summit doesn't extend beyond the neck. So, we define as the apex to be that part of the lung which is above the first rib. Okay, so this is a very important point that you must keep in mind. Okay, the apex of the lung, it is that part of the lung which extends beyond the first rib, which is above the impression of the first rib. So the sternal end, the apex extends beyond the sternal end, but it doesn't extend beyond, the summit doesn't extend beyond the neck of the vertebral end. The sternal end, here you have a cartilage, and by means of this cartilage, it articulates with the widest part of the manubrium sterni, forming the first chondrosternal joint, which is a primary cartilaginous type of joint. The first chondrosternal joint is a primary cartilaginous type of joint, unlike the other chondrosternal joints which are synovial in type. And this primary cartilaginous joint is replaced by bone around the age of 25 years, and thus the first rib has restricted mobility in quiet respiration. Now come to the vertebral end. First, the head. The head is small. It bears a single circular articular facet to articulate with the side of the body of the corresponding thoracic vertebra. So it is the first thoracic vertebra. In atypical ribs, in typical ribs, in the head, you find that there are 2 articular facets in typical ribs. One, a small upper facet and a lower larger facet with an intervening ridge. The lower larger facet articulates with the corresponding vertebra and the upper smaller facet articulates with the vertebra immediately above it. Okay, but here there is only a single circular articular facet, so it articulates only with the side of the first thoracic vertebra. Now coming to the neck. The neck is rounded. It is a bit rounded, and the direction is posterolateral with a slight upward inclination. Now this upward inclination makes the tubercle at a higher position than the head. So the neck is directed posterolateral with a slight upward inclination. Okay. The anterior surface of the neck is traversed by some structures like this. Okay, from medial to lateral, they are the sympathetic trunk. Then you have the first posterior intercostal vein, which drains into the brachiocephalic vein. Then lateral to it, you have the superior intercostal artery, which gives the posterior intercostal arteries of the first two intercostal spaces. Then you have the ascending branch of the ventral rami of the first thoracic nerve. Now this ascending branch of the ventral rami of the first thoracic nerve ascends in front of the neck, and then it joins with the ventral rami of the 8th cervical nerve and forms the lower trunk of the brachial plexus and is related here. Okay. The tubercle, it is broad and prominent. It is projecting backwards, upwards and medially, and it has a medial articular part and a lateral non-articular part. The medial articular part bears an oval facet which articulates with the transverse process of the first thoracic vertebra. Okay. Now the angle of the first rib is at the tubercle. So you don't have a separate angle here in the shaft. The angle is at the tubercle. Okay. Now the shaft is the part intervening between the tubercle and the sternal end. It has an upper surface, a lower surface, and an inner border and an outer border. Okay. The outer border is convex and longer, and the inner border is shorter and concave. The outer border is a bit rounded and the inner border is sharp. So for side determination, you can simply place the rib like this with the sternal end in front and the vertebral end behind. Okay. Now the two ends, the sternal end and the head, must touch the ground. Okay. If both the ends are touching the ground, then it is the rib of the corresponding side. Now, for example, this is the first rib of the left side. When I am keeping it like this, the two ends are touching the sternal end and the head, both are touching the ground. Okay. Now, if I keep it this way with the sternal end in front and the vertebral end behind, now you can see that the head is not touching the ground. Okay, so this is not the first rib of the right side, and this is not the superior surface, this is not the inferior surface, but it's just the opposite. It is the first rib of the left side, and this is the superior surface, and this is the inferior surface. So you don't go wrong here. Okay, you keep it like this. Both the ends must touch the ground. Then only you know that it is the rib of the left side. Now coming to the upper surface, you can see that if you just feel the upper surface here, you will note that there are two oblique grooves here, and in between them there is an intervening ridge. This intervening ridge presents a small bony projection in this bony projection that you can see along the inner border. This is known as the scalene tubercle, and it gives attachment to the scalenus anterior muscle. And this groove in front, here lodges the subclavian vein, and in the groove posterior to the scalene tubercle, here you have the lodgement of the subclavian artery, and here the ascending branch of the ventral rami of the first thoracic nerve goes and joins with the eighth cervical nerve, forms the lower trunk of the brachial plexus and is related here. So, in the posterior groove you have the subclavian artery and the lower trunk of the brachial plexus. Okay. Now, in this area between the posterior groove and the tubercle in the upper surface, this area, here you have the attachment of the scalenus medius muscle. Okay. Now, along the outer border, here behind the groove of the subclavian artery, in this region, you have the attachment of the upper part of the first digitation of the serratus anterior muscle. Okay, here you have the attachment of the upper part of the first digitation of the serratus anterior muscle. The posterior part of the outer border, here you see it's thick. Here you don't have any attachment, but here the scalenus posterior muscle sweeps over this region and gets attached to the second rib. Okay. So, this thickening is not produced by attachment, but it is produced by the sweeping of the fibers of the scalenus posterior. Now, in this area in front of the anterior groove, it is rough. Here you have the attachment of a ligament. It is the costoclavicular ligament between the first rib and the clavicle, and further in front you have the attachment of the subclavius muscle. It is the origin of the subclavius muscle, and it extends also to the adjacent part of the costal cartilage. Okay. So here you have the origin of the subclavius muscle extending to the cartilage of the first rib. The inner border, it gives attachment to the suprapleural membrane or the Sibson's fascia. It gives attachment to the suprapleural membrane or the Sibson's fascia. The lower surface of the first rib, it is you see it is relatively smooth and it is featureless. It doesn't present any costal groove. And along the outer border, you have the attachment of the intercostalis externus muscle, then the intercostalis internus muscle. In the first rib, you don't have intercostalis intimus muscle. The rest of the lower surface is covered by the costal pleura and the endothoracic fascia. So the first intercostal vessels and nerve pass along this surface between the intercostalis internus and the costal pleura, because there is no intercostalis intimus muscle. In the typical intercostal space, you have the neurovascular plane between the intercostalis internus and intimus. But since here there is no intimus muscle, so these vessels and nerves, they pass between the intercostalis internus muscle and the costal pleura, and the arrangement is from above downwards: nerve, artery and vein. Okay, and this is different, quite different from the typical intercostal space where you have the vein, artery and nerve from above downwards. So to summarize, the first rib is the strongest, flattest and the most curved of all the ribs. It is shortest of the two ribs. It has a sternal end, a vertebral end and an intervening shaft. The sternal end is lower about 3 to 4 centimeters than the vertebral end. The head bears a single circular articulate facet. The direction of the neck is posterolateral with upward inclination. The angle is at the tubercle. The shaft intervenes between the vertebral end and the sternal end, and it has an upper surface and a lower surface, outer border and an inner border. The upper surface presents two oblique grooves. That is attached. The inner border presents a scalene tubercle between the two grooves. The anterior groove lodges the subclavian vein, the posterior groove the subclavian artery and the lower trunk of the brachial plexus. There is attachment of the scalenus medius here. The scalene tubercle gives attachment to the scalenus anterior. At the outer border you have the attachment of the upper part of first digitation of serratus anterior, and the scalenus posterior muscle sweeps over this area. Here you have the attachment of the cartilage between the first rib and the clavicle. It is the costoclavicular ligament. Here you have the origin of the subclavius muscle. The lower surface is relatively smooth, doesn't have a groove, and here you have the attachment of intercostalis externus and internus with the intimus missing. Rest of the surface is covered by endothoracic. It is covered by the costal pleura and the thoracic fascia, and the intercostal vessels and nerves are located between the intercostalis internus muscle and the costal pleura. You hold the first rib in anatomical position in this way.